we're back. I realized after the last video was 10 years long that I don't think it's helpful to go through each question. So the other thing that I realized as I was going through it is I feel like the work that I have shown on each problem does a really good job of highlighting what was the important information and how I got the answer that I got. So for 11 through 38, what I'm going to do instead is just show you my answers and hope that if it does not make sense, you will come and ask me questions to clarify before you take your test. I'll look at them as I show you, and if there's anything that I think is worth discussing, I will. But essentially, I'm not going to talk about every single problem like I did in the last video. So let's do it. We're on number 11. The answer has to do with whose critical value was bigger. $12. It is worth mentioning that how you increase margin of error is one of two things. Either your confidence level was higher or your sample size was smaller. So if we're talking about how do we get a bigger margin of error, either her confidence level was bigger or the confidence level was bigger or your N was smaller. Remember, larger sample size reduces margin of error. $13. Here, before I even looked at any answers, I wrote down the keywords from interpreting level. That's why I have those things written here. Then I just tried to go through and find the one that matched the most, or the best, I should say. This goes back to this idea. So of all these confidence intervals, 95% of them captured the true value. So they're saying 90% of your, so they're trying to confuse you by saying 90% of all your random samples will result in a 90% confidence interval that captures. These two numbers are the same because that's what it means. If it's a 90% confidence interval, that means that 90% of the samples that resulted in a confidence interval captured the true value. I think them repeating it twice is confusing. 14. I think I said 14 and that was 15. I apologize. 16. I crossed these out because you can draw a conclusion about the true proportion because a random sample was taken. So C, D, and E were not options because to be able to draw a conclusion, all we needed was a random sample. 17. 18. 19. Usually when they're asking if a claim is plausible, all you're looking for is 3 in the interval. What I have written here is me describing what I thought this meant before I even read any of the solutions. So I wrote this down before I read any of the solutions. The best way to decrease margin of error, this decrease C means decrease confidence level. So I really should say decrease C%. Oh, yeah, this one's, did you guys catch that? The best way to decrease margin of error is to increase sample size. So I just circled the wrong one on that guy. It's 22. 23 is one of the most important problems to understand. If this one is not making sense to you, make sure that you get that cleared up before you test. '24. Is this the same as the last one? Nope. '29. So I have some of the reasoning written out, but then to compare them, I wrote up what the margin of error would be for the original compared to the margin of error for the newer corrected one, and found that this number underneath a root, it would be bigger. So by deduction, I was able to choose answer D. All I knew was that based off of what I calculated here, the interval was going to be wider. And the only one that was true was D. It's wider, and 0.27 is closer to 0.50 than 0.17. So this one, I just had to use problem solving skills and use deduction. 30 is another one that is a really good problem for seeing if you understand how to evaluate a claim with a confidence interval. So on this one was another one where I had to use deduction. And what I know about a t-distribution is that the variability decreases as t gets close to the standard normal shape. So this would be a small, in red, it would be a small sample size. But as your sample size gets bigger, your t-distribution starts to look like the curve in black. So that means that the closer that you get to a normal shape, the less variability you have, or I should say a standard normal shape. Because these are both normal curves. This standard normal curve has more data around the center and less in the tails. That means that it's less spread out. .32, you just needed to calculate your upper bound. .33, I had to do some calculations, so I actually calculated the p-hat and the margin of error for Lila and Robert. I knew that it had to be A because her margin of error is smaller. And the rest of these weren't true. These next ones are a little bit more straightforward because they're just math. This might be one you want to add to your overview if you think you might need it. We've done so many of these at this point that I just have that shortcut memorized. So obviously on a multiple choice, you're not graded for partial credit. So you can show on your multiple choice how as little or as much work as you would like. Notice in the problem they're telling you it's a proportion. And in the next problem they are telling you that it's a mean. Okay, any questions on these? Make sure that you get them cleared up before your test, and like not the 5 minutes before you take your test, like before your test. So if you need an explanation for any of the ones 10 through 38 that goes more in depth than what I gave, email me and say, hey, could you send me a detailed explanation of number 38? And I can, if you're in, especially my B days, if you're in my B day, I can just film that on Monday for you and make sure that I send it to you before you test on Tuesday. So if you need any of these clarified, email me and I will send you a video or do something to help clarify my reasoning on any of these.